I never expected to be remembered. Not in my family. Not even on my graduation day. While the crowd cheered, my father leaned close and whispered, "You'll be forgotten by next week." It wasn't anger that struck me. It was the weight of years buried in one sentence. But he didn't know the truth. I had sacrificed more than anyone there. And that day, the university honored a story he refused to believe. Mine. If you've ever lived in someone's shadow, you need to hear what happened next. Because it wasn't fame I chased. It was proof that I existed. The applause was deafening. Flashbulbs sparked like fireworks. My classmates beamed as they crossed the stage, diplomas in hand, futures in bloom. But all I heard was my father's voice, low and cold behind me. "You'll be forgotten by next week." That sentence didn't sting because it was sudden. It stung because it was familiar. A quiet echo of a truth I'd long tried to ignore. I was Emily Carter, pre-med, top of my class, dean's list every semester. But in my family, none of that mattered. In our house, accomplishments weren't counted in grades or scholarships. They were counted in touchdowns, trophies, and newspaper covers. And my brother Jake had all three. Jake was the golden boy, star quarterback at Lincoln High, then a full ride to a Division I college. My parents hung every article about him like museum pieces, framed, dusted, displayed proudly in our living room. Meanwhile, the only time my name made it onto the fridge was when I left a sticky note reminding Mom we were out of milk. There were no photos of me in the hallway, no stories told about my research or my internships. I wasn't resented. I was simply omitted, forgotten in the background like white noise. I used to tell myself it was just how they expressed love differently. But love shouldn't feel like absence. At dinner, the spotlight always returned to Jake. If I mentioned my upcoming exam, my father would grunt and steer the conversation back to my brother's latest game. "Emily," he once said, looking over the table like I was a misfiled document. "You're smart, yeah, but it's Jake who'll put this family on the map." That night, I remember staring down at my untouched food and wondering what map he meant and whether I even existed on it. Later, at another one of those family dinners, I brought home a certificate. Outstanding academic contribution in clinical research. I held it out like a peace offering. My father barely glanced up. "You're still doing that blood stuff?" he asked. "It's nice you have hobbies." That was the night he called me that girl on the side. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it like it was a fact, not a slight. "Jake's the legacy. Emily's just... well, she's figuring herself out." That was the moment something cracked, not just in me, but in the story I'd been telling myself, that maybe, one day, I'd be seen. Maybe not. A few days later, I found myself flipping through old photo albums, page after page of Jake's football games, birthdays, vacations. My own face only popped up in the corners, blurred, back-turned, or cropped, as if even the camera struggled to remember me. In the attic, I found a box of old journals. One belonged to my mother, back when she was pregnant with me. I wasn't looking for anything specific. Maybe I wanted proof that I'd been wanted, that I was more than an obligation. Instead, I found entries that twisted my stomach. Another girl. I don't know if I have the energy for this again. The timing couldn't be worse. This baby, it wasn't part of the plan. It was like reading the blueprint of my invisibility. I didn't cry. Not right then. I just sat there, gripping the fragile paper, as if it could anchor me to something real. I started to ask questions, quietly, carefully. I remembered a story my aunt once told me, in passing, about how my father had lost a local election when I was a baby. Supposedly, his opponent was a young female doctor who'd just opened a free clinic. People loved her. She made him look small, my aunt said, smirking. He never quite got over it. A woman in medicine, defeating him, gaining attention, admiration, everything he thought he deserved. Suddenly, it wasn't just that my father didn't care about what I did. Maybe he despised what it reminded him of. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking a question I'd never said aloud before. If I disappeared, would anything in this house change? The answer came not in silence, but in sound. I was walking past Dad's study the next evening when I heard him on the phone. His voice was tired, unguarded. He was speaking to someone I didn't recognize. She's smart, sure, but she won't leave a mark, not like Jake. Jake's going to matter. I froze. That sentence wasn't new. It wasn't even cruel. But hearing it said to someone else, as confirmation, as fact, stripped away the last veil I had left. It was the moment I stopped asking for proof of my worth, but it wasn't the moment I gave up. Not yet. After that night outside my father's study, I stopped trying to be seen. I started building my own way to matter. Not through grand gestures or speeches, but through small silent acts no one could strip away. I signed up for a community health program in the city, one that served underfunded neighborhoods, where clinics were rare and doctors rarer. I volunteered on weekends, during breaks, between exams. It was quiet work, administering vaccines, helping with records, translating paperwork for immigrant families. Most days I went home with sore feet and a full heart. No one knew I was there. And that was the point. I didn't want applause. I wanted meaning. But there was still a whisper inside me, maybe childish, maybe naive, that hoped one day someone would remember. That whisper birthed something new, a blog. The Quiet Healer. I wrote anonymously, never signing my name. I shared stories, not just mine, but those of the people I met. The mother who walked 3 miles just to get her child's asthma medication. The teenager who wrapped his own wounds because he was afraid to see a doctor. Their stories mattered, even if no one told them. So I told them. The blog grew, slowly at first. A few readers, a few shares, then a surge. One of my posts, about an undocumented woman who saved every penny for insulin she didn't use because she was afraid to register at the clinic, went viral. The story made it to a national healthcare forum. Doctors, nurses, even activists started quoting it. Still, I didn't tell anyone it was mine. Not my classmates, not my professors, definitely not my family. It felt like a secret worth protecting, like a garden I could grow in the dark. One afternoon, while walking across campus, I overheard 2 students in the library whispering about the post. Have you read this one from The Quiet Healer? Whoever writes this, they get it. I smiled but kept my head down. That sentence gave me more than my father ever had. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. During a follow-up clinic event in a local church, a parent recognized me from a blurry volunteer photo shared by the organization. She'd seen the viral post. She connected the dots. She thanked me, loudly, publicly. I panicked, brushed it off, begged her not to mention it. She didn't listen. 2 days later, a local blog did a feature. Quiet Healer Revealed, the face behind the blog. It had my name, my face, my story. I remember staring at the headline in the computer lab, pulse hammering in my ears. I wasn't scared of being known. I was scared of being known by the wrong people. I was right to be. That night, at dinner, my mother held her phone up with the article open. My father looked at me, his face unreadable. "This what you've been doing?" he asked. "Writing sob stories for strangers online?" They're not stories, I said quietly. They're lives. Real people. You used our name, he said. Our town. Our family. You dragged us into this. No, I said. I kept it anonymous. Until someone else. You embarrassed us, he snapped. You think anyone's impressed that you play nurse for poor people and cry about it on the internet? That's not legacy. That's pity porn. The words hit harder than I expected. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. You're ashamed of me? I asked, my voice small. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. They told me to shut the blog down, pull out of the clinics, focus on school. Be smart, my mother said. Don't ruin your future over emotions. I didn't yell. I didn't storm off. I nodded, excused myself, and went upstairs. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the laptop. The blog's dashboard was still open. Hundreds of comments, messages from readers, some asking for help, others just thanking me for seeing them. I didn't delete it, but I didn't post anything new either. It was the first time I felt truly alone. Not just misunderstood, but exiled. Like I'd committed some unspoken betrayal by choosing compassion over comfort. And still, I didn't regret it. A few days later, I received an envelope in my campus mailbox. No return address, just the university's seal. Inside was a letter from the Dean of Students. She'd read my blog. She knew who I was. And she wanted to meet. Not as a reprimand, as recognition. The dean's office smelled faintly of old books and fresh coffee. Sunlight slanted across the hardwood floors as she slid the letter I had received toward me again, as if to prove it was real. You've given this university something rare, she said. You reminded us that leadership doesn't have to be loud. You reminded us what it means to serve. She paused. At this year's graduation, we'd like to recognize you. Publicly. Officially. I didn't speak right away. My throat tightened. I'd spent years trying to be seen. And now, when the moment came, I felt almost unready. Like I was stepping into shoes I didn't believe belonged to me. Will my name be included? I asked. She smiled. Yes. It's time people knew who the quiet healer really is. When I walked out of that office, I didn't float. I trembled, because being acknowledged meant being vulnerable. No more walls, no more shadows. But it also meant choosing myself, loudly. That night, I reopened the blog. No anonymity this time. I changed the author name to Emily Carter and added a photo of me, smiling, tired, real. I wrote a new post titled, No Longer Quiet, detailing what had happened, why I disappeared, and why I was coming back. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I just told the truth. The response was overwhelming. Former patients commented. Fellow med students messaged. One even said she'd been afraid to pursue medicine after her parents called it a waste. Until she found my blog. Another wrote, You made me feel seen. Now it's your turn. I cried. Alone in my tiny dorm room, not from sadness, but from something bigger. Maybe peace. A week later, I got an email with a red subject line. TEDx invitation. Speaker inquiry. They wanted me to speak. Not about achievement, about value, about invisible impact, about how silence isn't weakness, and how not every hero wears a spotlight. The speech would be recorded, uploaded, shared. And I said yes, because maybe the girl who'd once sat in her attic wondering if she mattered, maybe she had something worth hearing after all. Have you ever felt like you only existed when someone noticed? Like your value flickered in and out depending on who happened to be watching? I used to live that way, but now I was building something that didn't depend on being seen. I was building something that could stand on its own. 2 months before graduation, I moved out. I found a small studio apartment above a bookstore off campus. It wasn't much. Creaky floors, loud pipes. But it was mine. Every inch reflected choice, not obligation. From there, I started something new. An online mentorship group for students who, like me, had faced resistance at home for choosing healing over prestige. We called ourselves Quiet Fighters. The name wasn't mine. It came from a message one member sent. We fight in silence, but we fight hard. Within weeks, the group grew. We held virtual check-ins, shared resources, vented fears, celebrated wins. Some were studying medicine, others psychology, social work, education. But all had one thing in common. They were done being told their dreams were too quiet to matter. One night during a group call, someone new joined late, kept their camera off. Their voice, when they finally spoke, made me freeze. "I'm Rachel. I used to know Emily." My heart kicked. Middle school, locker doors slamming, laughter behind me. The cruel nickname they'd chanted. Rachel had started it. But this Rachel sounded different, soft, nervous. "I didn't join to make things weird," she said. "I joined because I never forgot what I did, and I've spent years wishing I could say sorry." I didn't mute. I didn't disconnect. I breathed. "Then you're in the right place," I said. And that, somehow, healed something I hadn't even known was still broken. The group became more than a project. It became a movement. And while I was mentoring others, they were mending me. In the chaos of finals and speeches and life, an email arrived. No fanfare. Just a subject line. Commencement speech approval. Emily Carter. It was real. Official. My name. The closing keynote speaker. I hadn't told my parents. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I was ashamed. But because, for once, I didn't need their presence to validate my purpose. I stood in the mirror that night, rehearsal paper in hand, and whispered the first line of my speech. Some of us were born into families that forgot to remember us. But today I remember myself. And I smiled. The auditorium buzzed with electric anticipation. Rows of proud parents filled every seat, and the air smelled of fresh flowers, fabric, starch, and expectation. When my name was announced over the loudspeaker, commencement keynote, Emily Carter, recipient of the Chancellor's Humanitarian Honors. A hush fell, followed by a wave of applause. I stepped onto the stage in my crimson honors robe. The gold tassel on my cap swayed with each step. For a split second, everything blurred. Lights, faces, the sheer roar of the room. I scanned the crowd and found them. My mother sat stiffly in a floral dress, lips pursed. My father beside her, arms crossed. Neither clapped, neither smiled. But the rest of the audience did. They stood. Professors, students, even staff. One by one, applauding not for a valedictorian or a record breaker, but for someone they hadn't seen until now, for someone who chose to matter quietly. The university president stepped forward. Emily Carter has quietly impacted hundreds of lives through her medical service, her anonymous advocacy, and her compassion for the unseen. Today we see her. Today we honor her. The crowd erupted. A thunderous, living sound. Except in one place. Row 5, seat B. I watched as my father leaned slightly toward my mother and said, just loud enough for me to read his lips, "No one remembers the ordinary." That was it. The final wound. Clean. Precise. But I didn't flinch. I didn't fold. When the mic was placed in my hand, it was cold. My voice, when it came, surprised me with how steady it was. "I wasn't supposed to be on this stage," I began. "I wasn't the loudest. I wasn't the star. I wasn't the one expected to matter. My eyes drifted to them again, still unmoved. For years I tried to be what others thought mattered, until I realized I already did, quietly, fully, without permission. I paused. I'm not someone else. I'm not a symbol. I'm me, and for the first time, that's enough. The standing ovation started slowly, then grew, then roared. As I turned to walk off stage, I saw my father stand too. But not to clap. He stepped into the aisle, walked out of the auditorium, and never looked back. A photographer captured the moment, me on stage smiling through trembling lips, and in the far corner of the frame, my father leaving. That photo went viral within hours. By morning, my inbox had over 300 messages. By afternoon, news sites ran headlines like, "Graduate's powerful speech sparks viral storm after father walks out." Some praised the speech as brave, as a message for forgotten children everywhere. But others turned it into something else. Was it real? Blog star, accused of orchestrating drama for fame. A journalist from a conservative media outlet claimed my blog had exaggerated, maybe even fabricated patient stories. They used the photo of my father walking away to support their narrative. Ungrateful daughter shames her family for applause. My parents didn't speak publicly. They didn't need to. Their silence echoed through every interview I turned down, every article I refused to read. I tried to focus on finishing my exams, on wrapping up my group. But the noise seeped into everything. I began to second-guess every word I'd ever written, every choice I'd made. Had I gone too far? I stopped posting on the blog, closed the community forum, ghosted my own inbox. Messages piled up, some kind, some cruel. I answered none. I told people I needed space. But truthfully, I was slipping. I wasn't sleeping. I skipped meals. I replayed that moment on stage over and over, as if there might have been something I could have said differently, something that wouldn't have cost me my family. Late one night, I found myself rereading the first blog post I ever wrote. There are people you pass every day who are quietly saving lives. This blog is for them, because even the quiet deserve to be remembered. I wasn't saving lives now. I wasn't even saving myself. And that's when I called a therapist. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. Just a quiet Wednesday afternoon, a waiting room with neutral walls, and a woman who asked me gently, "Where would you like to begin?" I told her the truth. I told her about a family who loved loudly and conditionally, about a girl who built a quiet world of worth, only to have it shaken by the same hands she had tried to impress. And slowly, week by week, I began to stitch myself back together. Not for applause, but because healing, I learned, is also a quiet thing. The world didn't change when I walked out of therapy that first day. The headlines didn't fade. My father didn't call. The weight of what had happened didn't lift. But something small inside me shifted, like the click of a lock no one else could hear. I began writing again. Not for others this time, not even for the blog. Just for me. Each morning, I filled a few pages before the sun reached my window. Thoughts, memories, fragments of forgiveness I didn't know I had. At first, it was scattered, disjointed pieces of a voice I hadn't trusted in months. But slowly, it took shape. I called it, "I Remember Myself," not as a declaration, but a reminder of who I'd been, of who I was trying to become. I didn't post the manuscript. I didn't pitch it to publishers. It wasn't for a platform. It was for the girl who once needed proof that she mattered, a gift from the woman she had become. Some days the silence still felt sharp. There were moments when I missed the applause, missed the clarity of being praised, the false comfort of being seen by strangers when I wasn't seen by the ones who raised me. But I no longer craved it. I'd found something quieter and deeper. A few weeks into that writing rhythm, I received a letter. No return address. Just my name in clean, precise handwriting. Inside was a short note. I don't know if you remember me, but you helped save my daughter. She was scared to go to the clinic. You stayed late. You waited with her. She's healthy now. And in college. Thank you for staying. Tucked inside was a photo. A young woman in a lab coat, beaming in front of a university hospital. On the back, she'd written, I remember you. I held the picture to my chest. No one else needed to know. No social media post. No announcement. It was enough. That letter reminded me that there were still stories worth telling, and more importantly, worth preserving. That's how the Remembered Project began. I launched it with no budget, just a website and an idea, to collect and archive the voices of people whose impact had gone unnoticed. Janitors, caregivers, teachers, volunteers, the people who show up without asking for anything back. We created a nomination system. Each year we honored 10 unsung changemakers, gave them a platform, a small grant, and a space where their legacy could live on. I thought it would take years to grow. It didn't. In less than 6 months, we'd been featured in 2 health journals, interviewed on national radio, and partnered with community centers across 3 states. What surprised me wasn't the speed. It was the hunger. People were desperate to be remembered, not for glory, but for goodness. I was invited to speak again, this time at a global healthcare summit, not as a graduate or a blogger, but as a consultant, a leader, a voice. And somewhere in that blur of movement and rebuilding, I received another envelope. No stamp, no address, just slipped under the door of our project office. Inside was a single photograph. From my graduation, me, standing at the podium, eyes forward, lips parted mid-sentence. Behind me, the crowd stood. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was my father, half-turned in the moment he walked away. On the back of the photo, in familiar block letters, were 3 words. I remember now. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I placed the photo in a drawer, not out of spite, but as a page marker. That chapter was closed, not rewritten, not forgotten, just finished, because this was no longer about him. I stood taller now, not because the world finally saw me, but because I finally saw myself. And in seeing myself, I had learned how to see others. That, I realized, is what healing really is. Not forgetting, but remembering. On your own terms. It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. It didn't come in the form of a grand apology or some teary reconciliation beneath a family photo wall. In fact, there were no tears at all. Just silence. Soft, lingering. Not cold. We never talked about the photo. My father never mentioned the note, but months later he sent me a book, a biography of a pioneering female surgeon from the 1960s. Inside the cover he'd written 3 words. Thought you'd like this. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something else. Acknowledgement. That small gesture, barely there, easy to miss, was the quietest olive branch I'd ever received. And somehow, the most honest. I didn't call. I didn't write back. I just placed the book on my shelf, between volumes I'd spent years reading to understand people I never thought I'd be. My mother called one evening after a segment aired about the Remembered Project on public television. She didn't say congratulations, just asked if I was eating well. I said yes. She reminded me to rest. Then she hung up. Another page marker. We didn't rewrite our family, We simply turned to a different chapter. I stopped expecting them to see me fully, but I no longer needed them to, because somewhere between that stage and this life, I had learned to recognize myself, to validate my own worth, to build peace in the absence of praise. And that, I realized, was the most profound kind of freedom. I kept the apartment above the bookstore, even when I could afford something bigger. The creaky floors, the flickering kitchen light, the cat that napped outside my window. It grounded me, reminded me that I'd once started over here with nothing but a laptop and a stubborn will. I traveled often, giving talks about healthcare, mental wellness, and community building. But I always came back to the same bed, the same bookshelf, the same view. Recognition came, sure. Invitations, awards, even honorary degrees. But I turned many of them down. I wasn't chasing applause anymore. I was chasing impact, the kind that didn't need a spotlight to burn bright. Schools began teaching parts of my story in ethics classes. One district added a unit on quiet leadership, naming me as a case study in advocacy without ego. I smiled when I found out, not because I was proud of being in a book, but because some student somewhere might read it and feel seen, just as I had once longed to feel. In one of the final drafts of I Remember Myself, I wrote, "Some of us are born into echoes. We spend years trying to make noise, hoping someone hears. But eventually we realize our quiet isn't emptiness. It's power waiting to be owned." That line stayed with me. It still does. Years passed. The Remembered Project expanded into multiple chapters across the country. Volunteers ran storytelling booths at libraries, clinics, and senior homes, capturing narratives that would have otherwise disappeared. I no longer managed every detail. I didn't need to. The movement had outgrown me, as it should. What I did keep, though, was the classroom. Once a semester, I taught a seminar called Ethics and Empathy in medicine. It wasn't required, but the room always filled. Not because I was famous, because I told the truth. I told them about the cost of silence, the weight of invisibility, the danger of measuring worth by applause. I showed them the photo, not the viral one, but the one sent under my door. The moment that reminded me that some recognitions arrive too late and others arrive just in time. I didn't preach forgiveness. I didn't promise neat endings. I just shared the cracks I'd walked through and what I'd found on the other side. And on the last day of every class, I stood in front of those students, young, eager, not yet hardened, and I said the same thing. Don't chase recognition. Be so good they can't ignore you. Some of them nodded. Some looked confused. Some wrote it down, not yet understanding the depth. But one day, they would. And maybe, just maybe, when the world forgets to notice them, they'll remember that their worth was never up for debate. I used to think being remembered was the goal, but now I know better. The goal is to remember yourself, clearly, completely, fiercely, and to never let anyone convince you otherwise.